Okay, here we go. Fired up today. We're going to kind of start over. Okay, we're talking about the presidency of Thomas Jefferson and the Louisiana Purchase, Buck. And we're doubling the nation's size. So I'll just kind of, for you guys that weren't here yesterday and didn't get these notes, which may have only been daily, we'll kind of help you with this a little bit. So, doubling the nation's size. I stated yesterday that in 1800, shortly after Thomas Jefferson's election as president, Napoleon actually secured the territory of Louisiana for France from Spain. So now that vast country belongs to France. And at this time in history, Louisiana was a vast, enormous area. It went all the way from the Mississippi River, clear over to the Rocky Mountains, clear into Canada. It's a huge, huge amount of land, about 820,000 square miles. And Jefferson was quite alarmed when he found out that Louisiana became a French possession for two reasons. One, he was really concerned that the water routes along the Mississippi would no longer be accessible for the United States. And he also was concerned about the use of New Orleans in the mouth of the Mississippi River, which we had permission to use from Spain, but did not have permission to use from France. So because of that, President Jefferson sent an American minister of France, a fellow by the name of Robert R. Livingston, to meet with Napoleon. And do you remember, Talon, what Jefferson's orders were to Livingston concerning the purchase of part of the Louisiana territory? Or what, though? Not for the whole thing, but for what, Hannah?
Just New Orleans.
Just New Orleans and a little bit of western Florida. What he wanted was the ability to have this entire coastline here, is what he wanted. And he said that he would give $10 million just for that. Well, Livingston made the offer to Napoleon and was absolutely shocked with his response. So Livingston goes in. He wants to guarantee American control of the Mississippi River, so he offers $10 million for the city of New Orleans and western Florida. And when the offer was given to Napoleon, Napoleon's response to Livingston was shocking. Napoleon basically said, well, how much will you give for all of Louisiana? What do you give me for the whole thing? Well, it took some time, but after some communication back to the United States with President Jefferson, they increased the offer to $15 million. And Napoleon said yes. So they got the entire Louisiana Purchase, or vast area of Louisiana territory, for $15 million because of that offer. Now, how do we pay France with that? How do we just write them a check for $15 million?
Yep, sure.
No. We financed it. We financed it with interest. But I want to tell you something. This is kind of interesting. After financing it, because we had to pay interest, and we actually paid $27,267,622. Yep. We actually paid after interest $27,267,622. Now, if you do the math on that for you farmers, it turned out to be 3 cents an acre. 3 cents an acre. Okay? Now, why did Napoleon sell that valuable land to the United States for such a low price? Why would he do that? He really didn't need the money, although it didn't hurt him, because he has a plan. What's his goal at this time, Nick? What's he trying to do? To conquer Europe. And he doesn't want this other land to deal with. His plan is to result probably in a major war with Great Britain. You guys. His plan would result in a major war with Great Britain, and Napoleon could use the money to fight the war, and he believed since his concentration was going to be in Europe, he might lose it anyway, because it's so far away. So he figures $15 million toward the war effort is way better than nothing, and I really don't want the land anyway. So it turned out to be the steal of the century for the United States at 3 cents an acre. So that'll take us to our next subtopic then, which is the Lewis and Clark Expedition. What is it also known as? Anybody know? What's the name of the Lewis and Clark Expedition? The fancier name. Anybody know? You've probably heard it before. Called the Corps of Discovery. Okay, that's also what it's called, the Corps of Discovery. So we're talking about the Lewis and Clark Expedition, also known as the Corps of Discovery. What prompted the Lewis and Clark Expedition? What made it come about? Anybody know? Well, yeah, say it. Yeah, Jefferson saying, hey, I want to see what I paid $15 million for. And they were also wanting to see if they could find a water route to the Pacific, which is known in fancy words as what? Which we'll get to. Northwest Passage, we'll get to that in a minute. So, after the Louisiana Purchase, President Jefferson decided it was time to see exactly what the United States had paid $15 million for. So he formed an expedition called the Corps of Discovery. And it was settled to study Louisiana. You know what it cost to do that at the time? This is what he budgeted for this trip, for this expedition. $2,500. That's what it cost. Okay? So Jefferson formed an expedition. He called it the Corps of Discovery. To explore and study Louisiana, it cost the United States government $2,500. And basically what the expedition was going to do was try to see what we hadn't seen before. What would you compare this in modern history to, maybe? Very good! The moon landing. So you would compare this adventure to modern history, the moon landing. Okay? The expedition, the preparation, the dangers of this trip would compare to the dangers and preparations into a modern history moon landing in 1969. So very good, David. Well, the man that Jefferson chose to lead the expedition was Meriwether Lewis. Meriwether Lewis. And he was serving as President Jefferson's personal secretary at the time. Very skilled soldier. He was really an outdoorsman, a woodsman. And really, Jefferson thought he would be the best man to lead this expedition. And so he chose Meriwether Lewis. Again, Lewis was a skilled soldier, a skilled woodsman. He was serving as President Jefferson's personal secretary at the time, and he was the man Jefferson chose. Once he was chosen by Jefferson, Lewis then went out and chose fellow Virginian William Clark to lead the expedition with him. So Jefferson chose Lewis, and Lewis chose Clark, a fellow Virginian friend and someone that he certainly trusted to help him lead this expedition. Now, Clark was also a former Army commander. He was a very skilled map maker. That's one reason why he was chosen. So he was a former Army commander, but more importantly, he was a skilled map maker. And they're going to need this because they want to map or diagram what they see. And the idea is not only to see what they bought with their money, but like I mentioned, to find a water route to the Pacific Ocean known in history as the Northwest Passage. Now, when the Corps of Discovery left St. Louis, Missouri, they had 45 men with them, including Clark's Negro slave, York. So the expedition began with 45 men, including Clark's Negro slave, York. Now, I gave you a map that shows basically entrance into Montana and some dates. You might want to get that out in front of you, but I am going to give you some dates before they get there, so you can write them on your map or write them in your notes. Either way, and keep them together. So you might want to get that map out just for your, and maybe instead of writing notes, you want to note on the map. I don't know. I'll leave it up to you. Anyway, the expedition left the mouth of the Missouri River near present-day St. Louis, Missouri in May of 1804. The expedition left the mouth of the Missouri River, where the Missouri River runs into the Mississippi River, near present-day St. Louis, Missouri. And they did that in May of 1804. May of 1804. Which way are they going to be traveling? Up the Missouri or down the Missouri? Which way the water flowing? They're going to be traveling up the Missouri. And after traveling 1,600 miles up the Missouri, on October 24th, 1804, the expedition settled at the Mandan Villages near present-day Mandan, North Dakota. So after traveling up the Missouri for nearly 1,600 miles, on October 24th, 1804, the Lewis and Clark expedition settled at the Mandan Villages near present-day Mandan, North Dakota. Again, after traveling approximately 1,600 miles from St. Louis up the Missouri, on October 24th, 1804, the Lewis and Clark expedition settled at the Mandan Villages, which are located near present-day Mandan, North Dakota. It was at the Mandan Villages that Lewis and Clark hired a French-Canadian fur trader to be their guide, and his name was Toussaint Charbonneau. So on at the Mandan Villages is where Lewis and Clark hired French-Canadian fur trader by the name of Toussaint Charbonneau to serve as their guide for the expedition. So Toussaint Charbonneau was hired at the Mandan Villages by Lewis and Clark. He was a Canadian fur trader, and he served as a guide. You have pictures of these people that you can look at your leisure. Now this is kind of interesting. I try to give you a little bit of history you didn't know. Maybe you didn't know this, but I'd be surprised. Actually, Charbonneau had 2 wives at the time. And Lewis and Clark told him to pick one to be the interpreter for the expedition. So he had to make a choice. So Charbonneau actually had 2 wives at the time. And Lewis and Clark said, hey, you got to pick one of these 2, and they're going to serve as an interpreter for the expedition. And he chose Sacagawea, who was at the time 16 years old and pregnant. So Toussaint Charbonneau, rough-looking guy. Boy, I'll tell you what, that Sacagawea didn't have much taste in mint, by looks anyway. But anyway, Toussaint Charbonneau had 2 wives. Lewis and Clark told him to pick one to serve as an interpreter during the expedition. Charbonneau chose Sacagawea, who at the time was 16 years old and pregnant. Well, on February 11th, 1805, during their stay there for the winter, what happened with Sacagawea? Gave birth to a son. His name was Jean-Baptiste. Jean-Baptiste. So on February 11th, 1805, Sacagawea gave birth to a son which was named Jean-Baptiste. So what are they doing from October till probably April? Just wintering and getting prepared for the expedition. They had traveled the 1,600 miles up the Missouri. They stopped at the Mandan Villages for the winter. During that time, they hire a French-Canadian fur trapper by the name of Toussaint Charbonneau to be their guide. He has 2 wives. They tell him to choose one. He chooses Sacagawea, who will become interpreter during the expedition. She's pregnant and has a baby boy, Jean-Baptiste, on February 11th, 1805. Now, the Mandan Indians live at the Mandan Villages, and they provided 3 very important items for the expedition prior to their departure that spring. So the Mandan Indians were very helpful to the Lewis and Clark expedition by supplying 3 specific things prior to their departure that spring. First thing they did is they allowed the expedition to hunt buffalo with them. They allowed the expedition to hunt buffalo with them. Seems like a trivial thing, but they were pretty possessive of those buffaloes. So to give them an opportunity to hunt with them and kill buffalo that they pretty much believed were what? theirs was pretty good. So the Indians allowed the expedition to hunt buffalo with them. They also sold the expedition other food. They also sold the expedition other food. So they're going to be pretty well equipped food-wise, and the hides are going to be used and those types of things when they leave. And what else do you think they gave them? Because they have no idea.
Direction.
Advice on where to go. Yep, very good. Advice on their travels up the Missouri, because they don't know where they're going and they're trying to figure out what they're going to run into. So they give them the opportunity to hunt buffalo with them. They sell the expedition extra food, other food, and they give the expedition advice on their travels up the Missouri River. So, after spending the winter in early April of 1805, the expedition left the Mandan villages and headed for the mouth of what river? What river runs into the Missouri? The Yellowstone. Okay? So, the expedition left the Mandan villages in early April of 1805 and headed for the mouth of the Yellowstone River, which is going to run where? Into the Missouri. Does the Missouri River continue through Montana? It does. It goes the northern route. The river that goes the southern route of Montana is what? The Yellowstone. Okay?
So was the Yellowstone really called the Yellowstone at that point?
Uh-huh. Yep. Now, they're going to name some rivers here, but I don't know how much detail we're going. We'll talk about that. Now, this was kind of interesting. When they left the Mandan villages in early April of 1805, they actually sent the keel boat back to St. Louis with 12 men. So the keel boat was sent back to St. Louis with 12 men. Keel boat, K-E-E-L, boat, one word, keel boat. They sent the keel boat back to St. Louis with 12 men. And they were sent back for a couple of reasons. First of all, to deliver dispatches back to President Jefferson. What's a dispatch? Message, information, letters. Okay? So, once they got to the Mandan village and stayed the winter, they sent a keel boat back with 12 men with dispatches for President Jefferson, letting know kind of where they were at and what they were doing. What else do you think they sent back to him? Just as a sample. What? No, not a map. Good guess. Sent them back live specimens, such as magpies and prairie dogs, bones of animals, furs of animals, and plants that they had never seen before. So they sent back some early specimens. They'll bring back other specimens when they return, but they sent back some early specimens such as magpies and prairie dogs, bones of different animals, some different furs of different animals that they captured out there, and plants. So, if you look at your map, Kyle Lamb, when does the expedition reach the mouth of the Yellowstone River?
The end of April 1805.
Very good. End of April 1805. So, at this point, if you want to write your notes on your map, or however you want to do it, but we're going to be going through Montana. Okay, so the expedition reaches the mouth of the Yellowstone River by the end of April 1805. So you can see in your map kind of where we're at. So are they actually in present-day Montana if they're at the mouth of the Yellowstone? No, they're just barely into what? North Dakota. Okay? They're not in Montana yet because the mouth actually is in North Dakota. Now, as they get into Montana, they have two major concerns. The expedition has two major concerns as they move into present-day Montana on their way to the Pacific.
Jeffrey Day, please come to the office. Jeffrey Day.
What do you think they're most concerned about? Because they've heard about him, but they've never seen him. What? Not so much that. Geographically. The Rocky Mountains. They've heard of these treacherous Rocky Mountains, so they wonder what? Gee, they're into Montana. Where are these Rocky Mountains? Now, they're a long ways from them at this point, but they don't know that. Okay? So when they get into Montana, they're thinking, gee, I wonder where these vast Rocky Mountains are that we've heard of. And once we get to the Rocky Mountains, their next concern is what? How are we going to get over them? That's right, because they know they have to cross the Rocky Mountains to get to where? Pacific Ocean. Okay? So as they're in Montana, the expedition has two major concerns as they continue their journey to the Pacific. Number one, where are these vast Rocky Mountains they talk about, and how are we going to get across them once we find them? So you can kind of follow on your map here. What? You don't have a map? Yeah. In mid-May 1805, where is the core of Discovery, Meg? In mid-May 1805. They're at the mouth of what? The Milk River. Very good. Now that river runs into the Yellowstone River. And guess where it got its name? Lewis and Clark named it the Milk River because of what? What time of the year is it? Spring. And what's the water look like? Is it clear? It looks milky. Now the river was originally named by the Indians, and they called it the river that scolds all others. That's just what they called it. But Lewis and Clark named it as it is today, the Milk River, because of its milky appearance. And they were there in mid-May 1805. Okay, is everybody kind of picking that up? Okay, Madison, on June 2nd, 1805, what mouth, they reached the mouth of what river? Good guess, it's Marias River. You wouldn't know that unless you're in Montana. Marias River. On June 2nd, 1805, Lewis and Clark reached the mouth of the Marias River. Guess where that river got its name? Lewis named it after his cousin, Moriah Wood, just so you know. I don't know how important it is, but he did. And they call it the Marias River. Now, they actually stayed here for 10 days. From June 2nd